Let's talk about
Right.
the primary vector, right, which is not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're looking up on screen here is at the various life cycles of a tick, typically a deer tick, but there's other forms of ticks. You encounter these in forests and in wooded areas, primarily in North America along the northeastern seaboard, but they're everywhere now. And this epidemic is, largely born out of the transmission of what these guys carry, which is Borrelia burgdorferi, spirochete bacteria that's lodged into their abdomen that when they bite you, they release in their spit, to make it overly simplified. But they're not the only vector. But part and parcel to this message is, make sure if you're walking in wooded areas that you cover up. I'm not a huge fan of, massive amounts of DEET necessarily.
Right.
But that is what what are your thoughts on that? Just
Just looking at this picture, you have to realize how small these little creatures are. Yeah. So something the size of a poppy seed can completely change your life in less than a second. When ticks bite, you don't feel them bite. I want everybody to be very clear. Unlike a bee that stings you, you've been stung. And ticks don't just hold Lyme disease. They hold a lot of different bacteria in them, a lot of co-infections. Thank you. And that's very important because the combination of what's in their saliva and what they're transmitting into the human is a factor that has to be taken into consideration. When you're bit, or if you are one of the fortunate few that realize you've been bit by a tick, there is a common myth that Lyme disease creates as a bullseye rash. This is an immediate, recognition that you've been infected by Lyme. But the majority of people that have bit by ticks that carry Lyme disease do not present a bullseye rash. In addition, these ticks kind of hide in these very dark crevices of the body, belly buttons, behind the ear, in the hairline, places where you're not going to normally check or see a rash if one to appear.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very good points. My own daughter was bitten by a tick. Happened to be in the panhandle of southern Florida, and or the southern panhandle of Florida. And it was incredibly faint. So this was a starry tick, by the way. There's various types of tick. So this wasn't a deer tick. There are some deers in the area that the crocodiles have their way with, I'm sure. But we don't know where this came from. But it was a very, very faint presentation. Only because I was extremely educated on the matter was I able to question maybe this is. Had her tested, brought to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto where I'm based, and it was positive. And we got her into very early intervention, so she was fine. But not everyone's that lucky. And only, I believe the stats are somewhere around 50% that you would even produce any form of a bullseye lesion. Which, by the way, you're looking at here in a bullseye, of course, is that centrality. The tick is no longer there, but you've got the red margins, and they expand outward, and that's part of the immune system's response. But only 50% of people present this way. You don't have a recollection yourself of actually
Unfortunately,
seeing a bullseye rash.
No, I never, my parents don't recognize the bullseye rash. They don't even recognize, being bit by a tick prior. And my dad's from Michigan. My mom's from California. And even both of them were very little awareness around Lyme disease.
Right.
So, you just very, very well expressed, the anxiety, the confusion, the depression, all of those things that you went through until you got the understanding of this was Lyme's disease. But then from there, obviously you're a mother now. You have many healthy children. So tell us about how you went from that stage through conceiving, pregnancy, having children, and all of the considerations that you made to make that successful.
Yeah. God had a part of it, and I didn't believe that at the time. When my husband and I decided we were going to get married, at that time, I didn't really want kids for a number of reasons, personal ones. But then when we made that decision that we were going to start a family, I got very nervous because during my journey with Lyme disease, and it was 10 years of treatment and intervention treatment, I've had 3 PICC lines, I've taken thousands of supplements, very invasive treatment. And when we made the decision to have a child, I knew that this was an infectious disease, and I was very terrified of that. And so I decided to dive a little bit deeper into that and understand what my risks were of having a child. I went to a few fertility doctors to just also get a baseline of where my body was at. Was I healthy enough to have a child? I've had chronic illness the majority of my life, and does this put me at risk of stressing my body? The top fertility doctors in the area, I live in Orange County, California, so they're pretty well.
Very good doctors.
Very good doctors, that's right. We got Newport, top doctors. They were very skeptical of me getting pregnant, number one, just based on their baseline knowledge of hormones and the ability to do so, on top of their very little awareness around Lyme, but knowing it was not going to help the journey.
Yep.
So I made a decision to go through an IVF process since my risk was high and my ability to conceive was low. And through IVF, I understood that there was another option for me, and that was surrogacy. At the time, I've never heard of surrogacy. I think if it was popular, it was very, it was an area that wasn't really talked about. Or
unknown.
Unknown, yes.
Yeah.
Very little unknown about it, or maybe only accessible for like the very wealthy. And I made a decision I was going to do surrogacy because that was the safest thing for my kids as a mother. And so I did that. I had an amazing surrogate experience. IVF and retrieving my eggs was one of the most difficult things I did. It did exacerbate my Lyme, and it did come back, and I had to go through rounds of treatment to get back to a baseline. And I mean baseline is like I can get up in the morning, I can feed myself, I can brush my teeth, I can take a shower, and I can do a baseline work hourly, right? So I went through the surrogacy experience. My first 2 kids I had through surrogacy, and then miraculously I got pregnant naturally, and it really truly was a miracle. I had a very difficult pregnancy. There was a lot of concern about contraction for my child, and I am very hyper aware of his symptoms and his development even today. Even the smallest little thing that he may do different or may not hit on the development chart, my motherly fear is what if? But I do everything I can to educate my children about Lyme disease. They are very aware, even though we live in Southern California and people have said to me, Lyme doesn't exist here. That is completely false fact. And it does exist. And my kids are at parks and they're playing in the grass. And because it's Southern California, they wear shorts and flip-flops. And they have to be aware of, there's doom lurking in the grass or in the woods, and bringing animals in your house, they can also be a factor of transmitting bugs into the house and potentially being bit by a tick. So education is the foundation, and watching my kids and knowing that if something feels off, I'm going to research and I'm going to figure out an answer.